In the autumn haze of 1940 over southern England, the air trembled beneath the echoing thunder of aerial warfare. German formations clashed with determined British squadrons, leaving contrails stretched like ghostly scars across the clouded morning sky. Within distant observation rooms, Japanese military attachés watched German reports detailing the persistent resilience of the Hawker Hurricane in combat. These evaluations flowed through diplomatic channels, reaching Tokyo's Air Technical Bureau with precise measurements of speed, armament, and climb performance. The tone of German assessments carried reluctant respect, noting the Hurricane's rugged airframe and surprising stability under sustained fire. Japanese engineers, accustomed to the lightweight maneuverability of the Zero prototype, regarded the British fighter as almost brutishly constructed. They described its form as inelegant, yet formidable, its broad wings suggesting endurance rather than grace, a machine born of necessity. Intelligence officers compiled these observations with methodical precision, creating comparative charts that aligned Hurricane data beside Messerschmitt and Zero performance metrics. Through these studies emerged an early Japanese belief that British aircraft emphasized survivability over agility, reflecting divergent design philosophies entirely. By late 1940, analysts concluded the Hurricane represented an older doctrine of air combat, valuing toughness above refined aerodynamic innovation. Stay with us as this story deepens, because what Japanese intelligence would later discover would completely challenge those early assumptions. The British fighters' success during desperate skies over Dunkirk and London forced Axis observers to reconsider initial dismissive evaluations quickly. German test pilots admitted its stability during gunnery passes was exceptional, making it a steady firing platform under chaotic battlefield conditions. Japanese officers, reviewing Luftwaffe combat footage, recognized that the Hurricane's heavy construction concealed an underlying operational reliability worth closer examination. Reports from Berlin hinted that Allied tactics maximized its defensive potential, using coordinated formations to offset performance disadvantages effectively. Tokyo's aeronautical strategists noted these methods with cautious intrigue, questioning whether endurance and teamwork could triumph over raw maneuverability alone. This quiet analytical exchange between Axis partners became a turning point, planting seeds of technical curiosity inside Japan's own aviation community. What began as distant observation would soon evolve into a comprehensive study of Western durability, reshaping Japanese understanding of aerial endurance. By early 1941, Japanese engineers within the Air Technical Bureau began examining British aircraft schematics forwarded through German intelligence archives. The Hawker Hurricane's design revealed a curious balance between outdated methods and practical wartime innovation that deeply fascinated technical evaluators. Its construction combined a traditional tubular framework with metal skins in later variants, demonstrating an evolutionary compromise between eras entirely. Japanese technicians, trained under philosophies emphasizing weight reduction and aerodynamic fluidity, viewed this approach as both archaic and brilliantly utilitarian. They dissected German reports describing the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine's supercharger efficiency, analyzing compressor stages and altitude performance curves meticulously for insight. The Merlin's resilience under prolonged operational stress impressed them, particularly its ability to maintain consistent output, despite damage or misfiring cylinders. In Tokyo's aeronautical laboratories, comparative assessments against the Nakajima Sakai engine illuminated stark differences in material strength and thermal tolerance immediately. The British metallurgy displayed superior resistance to fatigue cracking, a quality Japanese alloy production struggled to replicate under wartime material constraints effectively. Technical summaries emphasized that while Japanese engines achieved lighter power-to-weight ratios, British units prioritized reliability through meticulous component standardization. Engineers noted that even field-maintained Hurricanes could sustain performance levels exceeding expected operational life under frontline conditions remarkably. They recognized this represented an industrial philosophy focused on endurance rather than perfection, a principle that wartime Japan found increasingly admirable. German advisors also reported that hurricanes tolerated maintenance neglect astonishingly well, continuing sorties after minimal mechanical attention between missions routinely. This discovery led to speculation within Japanese design committees about integrating similar redundancy principles into forthcoming domestic fighter prototypes eventually. Blueprints of the hurricane's coolant system and fuel distribution channels revealed exceptional simplicity, minimizing failure points during intense aerial engagements repeatedly. Such mechanical pragmatism contrasted with Japan's tendency toward over-refined engineering, where precision sometimes compromised ease of production or repair severely. The British emphasis on mass manufacturability struck a profound chord, particularly among industrial strategists facing limited high-grade resource availability simultaneously. Reports from Berlin further highlighted the aircraft's ability to absorb structural punishment without catastrophic airframe collapse, even after repeated engagements. This resilience fascinated Japanese metallurgists, who compared recovered alloy fragments from European wrecks with their domestic steel and duralumin variants comprehensively. They concluded the hurricane embodied a philosophy where survival of the machine ensured survival of the mission, a concept newly appreciated. Through such revelations, Japanese understanding of Western aviation broadened profoundly, shifting perception from skepticism to measured respect for British engineering pragmatism. In late 1941, Japanese intelligence officers gathered inside a dimly lit analysis hall in Tokyo to study captured German combat footage carefully. The reels displayed hurricanes rising through the fog above southern England, banking heavily as contrails twisted into white spirals against the dark clouds. German camera crews had documented engagements between hurricanes and Messerschmitt Bf-109s with remarkable clarity, offering the Japanese their first real combat impressions. Analysts noted that the hurricane rarely matched the German fighter in pure climb or dive rates, yet remained persistently within the fight. Each recorded sortie revealed an aircraft designed not for elegance, but for survival, trading speed for stability under violent tactical maneuvering. Japanese officers accustomed to lightweight agility marveled at how the hurricane could still evade destruction through coordinated defensive teamwork consistently. Reports described formations rotating to cover damaged wingmen, an approach that aligned aerial discipline with the mechanical endurance observed earlier. It was not the aircraft's elegance that commanded respect, but the unwavering coordination between pilot and machine under relentless attack. Even against faster opponents, hurricanes absorbed cannon strikes, returned fire methodically, and landed intact upon battered British airfields without catastrophic failure. German evaluators had underestimated its sustained performance in attritional engagements, something the Japanese found strategically instructive for extended Pacific operations. At mid-mission briefings, discussions arose about how such characteristics might translate to island defense scenarios across the Pacific if mirrored locally. They debated whether heavier Japanese fighters like the Ki-43 or future Ki-84 could adopt similar durability without sacrificing agility completely. The footage demonstrated that combat effectiveness derived not solely from mechanical superiority, but from cohesion, tactics, and pilot resolve intertwined. Japanese observers emphasized that the hurricane's robustness allowed pilots to focus on combat decisions rather than aircraft preservation constantly. This realization contradicted their doctrine prioritizing speed and maneuverability as the ultimate determinants of aerial supremacy in any prolonged engagement. The hurricane, though seemingly outdated, had achieved psychological dominance through reliability, endurance, and the visible courage of its operators collectively. One German report noted its uncanny ability to reappear in the sky after being declared lost only hours earlier repeatedly. That resilience became symbolic of Allied tenacity, a quality that impressed even rival militaries trained to exploit mechanical weakness decisively. When Tokyo analysts summarized findings, they described the hurricane as an aircraft that refused surrender, an engineering spirit beyond measurement entirely. Through the lens of those flickering combat reels, Japan understood that machinery alone could not define victory, only the spirit commanding it. By early 1942, as Japanese air strategists reviewed translated Luftwaffe documents, attention shifted from admiration to adaptation grounded in pragmatic necessity. The hurricane's combat endurance and defensive maneuver formations had revealed an aerial doctrine capable of absorbing punishment while maintaining operational coherence. At the Japanese Army Air Technical Research Institute, engineers and instructors began dissecting how such resilience could integrate into imperial flight training methodology. They studied engagement geometry from European battle footage, where hurricanes executed defensive spirals and mutual coverage in tightly coordinated rotational patterns. These observations contradicted Japanese assumptions that individual mastery alone ensured survival, suggesting instead that teamwork and structure amplified pilot efficiency remarkably. Tokyo's tactical command divisions then issued directives urging squadron leaders to rehearse collective turning engagements, mimicking British Vic formation cohesion precisely. Instructors at Akano Air Academy conducted mock drills inspired by these foreign tactics, assessing whether Japanese fighters could sustain prolonged defensive postures effectively. The results demonstrated improvement in survivability, though pilots reported reduced flexibility, a trade-off that challenged the Empire's long-standing doctrine of solo aggression. Despite hesitation, senior officers acknowledged that discipline and communication had preserved British formations that might otherwise have been annihilated completely. Thus began a gradual re-evaluation of aerial priorities, where instinct met structure and innovation intertwined with deeply rooted martial philosophy thoughtfully. At the midpoint of these adaptations came the realization that aircraft design dictated doctrine as much as doctrine dictated aircraft inherently. The Hurricane's thick wings, strong undercarriage, and steady control allowed cooperation that lighter Japanese airframes simply could not replicate easily. Commanders proposed experimental reinforcement programs for the Ki-43 and Ki-44, though material limitations prevented wide implementation across operational squadrons effectively. Still, war planners valued the conceptual lesson. Defense was not dishonor, and survival served strategy when executed through coordinated intent. Simulated intercepts against bomber formations illustrated the importance of layered approach angles, a principle derived from studying hurricane interception countermeasures thoroughly. Reports concluded that collective discipline might extend mission longevity, even when facing numerically or technologically superior adversaries under sustained operational pressure. Strategists also evaluated radio communication standards, recognizing that the hurricane's coordinated responses depended upon efficient transmission rather than instinctive reactionism. These insights fueled debates across imperial headquarters, where traditional valor clashed with modern coordination as competing paths toward aerial supremacy. By summer 1942, the Empire's training ethos began bending toward structure, a subtle echo of what British resilience had already proven unshakable. The hurricane had inadvertently reshaped Japanese aerial thought, teaching that control under chaos could outlast brilliance unguarded, a paradox quietly acknowledged reverently. By mid-1942, as Japanese intelligence summaries circulated among senior aviators, the hurricane's symbolic weight extended far beyond its mechanical form. It represented a mentality of defiance that seemed to defy logic, an aircraft surviving battles it should have lost decisively. Pilots reading translated British communiques sensed something unnerving, the idea that courage could be engineered into aluminum and rivets themselves. In Tokyo's air academies, instructors began using the hurricane as a case study in morale under adversity, emphasizing determination through attrition. The aircraft's reputation as the soldier's fighter spread quietly across imperial analysis circles, provoking both respect and discomfort among technical officers. For warriors trained to glorify decisive engagement, the hurricane's slow endurance strategy felt alien, almost philosophical in its quiet persistence. Captured film footage showing hurricanes limping home through smoke-filled skies inspired awe, not ridicule, among Japan's flight psychology researchers observing pattern resilience. Their reports noted that Allied success stemmed not solely from machinery, but from collective identity forged through shared resistance under pressure. This insight disturbed command theorists who had long believed invincibility resided in instinct and sacrifice, not cooperation and survival against odds. The British pilots' refusal to concede airspace created an image of immortality, magnifying the Hurricane's psychological presence far beyond its performance charts. Amid mounting Pacific campaigns, comparisons grew inevitable, as Japanese aces flying agile Zeros encountered similarly stubborn Allied formations defending distant airfields. The lessons from Europe re-emerged, reminding officers that attrition could demoralize attackers faster than outright technological inferiority might suggest clearly. Pilots trained to dominate through agility began sensing uncertainty, wondering if endurance rather than brilliance determined the outcome of modern air warfare. Psychological studies within the Army Aeronautical Research Section described fatigue creeping into units accustomed to swift victory but unprepared for drawn engagements. The Hurricane, though rarely encountered directly, haunted strategy rooms as a symbol of persistent defiance, its name whispered during doctrinal debates persistently. American and British propaganda further amplified this mystique, portraying the aircraft as an unbreakable shield of democracy that refused extinction absolutely. Japanese observers recognized the narrative power behind such imagery, understanding how perception shaped morale as powerfully as weaponry did tangibly. The revelation that enemy pilots drew confidence from a machine once dismissed as outdated struck deeply within the imperial hierarchy unsettlingly. In reports to the War Ministry, psychologists warned that overlooking emotional endurance could erode even the most disciplined fighting force eventually. Thus, through a plane once underestimated, Japan confronted the truth that spirit and survival intertwined inseparably within the evolving nature of war. By late 1942, the Japanese High Command began reassessing its long-term aviation policies in light of analytical data regarding the Hurricane's battlefield persistence. Imperial intelligence summaries emphasized that Allied endurance doctrine required not only strong airframes, but also logistical depth and consistent industrial replenishment. Tokyo's Aeronautical Technical Bureau initiated studies comparing resource allocation efficiency, contrasting Japanese hand-built precision against Britain's mass production resilience during protracted air campaigns. Engineers observed that the Hurricane's easily replaceable parts and field repair design created strategic continuity even under catastrophic operational losses overall. This realization prompted debates across planning councils concerning whether Japan's emphasis on technological artistry compromised sustained aerial readiness during extended conflicts inevitably. Naval strategists argued for the adoption of simplified production models, though cultural resistance persisted, valuing craftsmanship over durability in combat equipment design philosophy. Within the Imperial Army Air Force, procurement officers proposed standardized component systems, citing Hurricane field reports as validation for modular engineering evolution. Such ideas clashed with entrenched traditions, emphasizing performance over practicality, yet younger officers championed modernization as essential for strategic longevity ultimately. A few forward-thinking engineers at Nakajima and Kawasaki factories experimented with hybrid assembly protocols to reduce downtime between operational sorties substantially. While output gains were modest, these experiments marked the first tangible response linking combat endurance to industrial adaptation directly across Japan's aviation infrastructure. At the strategic level, analysts also reconsidered pilot rotation schedules, inspired by Allied methods that preserved veteran experience rather than exhausting elite squadrons prematurely. Reports indicated that Hurricane units sustained effectiveness because leadership preserved institutional knowledge instead of sacrificing veterans for symbolic achievements exclusively. Japanese command restructuring began incorporating phased rest programs, although execution varied widely between air districts constrained by logistics and entrenched command culture dynamics. The shift reflected a subtle but vital recognition that maintaining morale required continuity as much as courage or technological superiority itself. Military attachés stationed in Europe continued forwarding intelligence, highlighting Britain's repair depots' efficiency and decentralized maintenance doctrine across forward operating bases consistently. These insights were presented in 1943 conferences emphasizing resilience engineering, yet budgetary priorities diverted focus toward offensive innovations rather than sustainability reforms. Still, the concept of structural endurance lingered, gradually influencing design philosophy that would later manifest within late-war interceptor prototypes modestly. The Hurricane thus reshaped Japanese strategy indirectly, teaching that true aerial dominance depended upon adaptability and sustainable momentum beneath ideological conviction entirely. Command journals acknowledged reluctantly that wars of industry demanded machines that could endure losses without crippling national capacity under sustained assault, inevitably. Through the legacy of that British fighter, Japan glimpsed an uncomfortable truth, that courage without continuity could not prevail against resilience conceived through design. By early 1943, the equilibrium of aerial warfare began tilting, and Japan's theoretical insights met the harsh arithmetic of attrition decisively. The empire's air arms, stretched across immense distances, discovered that adaptation alone could not offset the mounting numerical advantage of Allied formations. What began as strategic observation of the Hurricane's endurance evolved into a haunting mirror, reflecting Japan's own vulnerabilities with devastating clarity. British and American fighters now carried forward the same durability principles that Japanese analysts had once admired and quietly feared. Every surviving Hurricane in European skies served as proof that design philosophy founded on survival could outlast brilliance dependent on perfection. In the Pacific, Allied bombers accompanied by rugged escort aircraft challenged the Japanese conception of air dominance forged through maneuver and morale. Reports from Rabaul and New Guinea described increasingly coordinated enemy attacks, their patterns echoing the Hurricane's cohesive formation doctrine precisely. Japanese squadrons accustomed to isolated heroism now confronted formations that absorbed damage collectively, turning endurance into a weapon of psychological warfare. The Empire's pilots, trained to dominate through fluid artistry, now found themselves overwhelmed by mechanical persistence and relentless numerical coordination effectively. The doctrine that once prized sacrifice above structure began to fracture beneath the reality of endless waves of organized resistance collectively. In response, headquarters attempted to reassert control through intensified discipline, but exhaustion eroded morale faster than command orders could restore determination. The Hurricane's lesson had been learned intellectually, but not embodied institutionally, leaving Japan caught between reverence for valor and need for reform. Captured Allied aircraft, including damaged Hurricanes recovered through German channels, became teaching instruments revealing the subtle genius of survivability over spectacle decisively. Analysts noted how field mechanics could restore these machines within hours, while Japanese squadrons often grounded aircraft awaiting delicate part replacements. The contrast magnified a broader strategic divide. Britain fought to endure, Japan fought to excel, and endurance ultimately defined mastery enduringly. By the middle of 1944, this realization crystallized within imperial briefings, though by then, Allied dominance had already solidified irreversibly. Each engagement revealed that control of the skies no longer depended solely on pilot skill, but on cohesive industrial ecosystems entirely. The Hurricane's endurance principles had evolved through Western collaboration into a war-winning system of repair, communication, and relentless operational momentum entirely. For Japan, acknowledging that supremacy belonged to structure rather than spirit proved both enlightening and devastating in equal measure historically. Thus, as the balance of air power shifted, the Hurricane's shadow lingered, a symbol of victory built not on speed, but survival understood completely. When the war's echoes faded in 1945, the lessons of the Hurricane remained embedded in Japan's post-war engineering conscience unforgettably. Factories once devoted to crafting fragile interceptors now turned toward resilience-based design, inspired by the very aircraft once dismissed arrogantly. At Nakajima's surviving design bureaus, engineers analyzed recovered Hurricane components, marveling at their simplicity, accessibility, and the philosophy of serviceability driving their structure. That analysis seeded an understanding that durability and function could coexist with elegance, creating the foundation for Japan's later aviation renaissance deliberately. By the early 1950s, former wartime engineers, now contributing to civil industries, incorporated modular design inspired by the Hurricane into passenger aircraft frameworks purposefully. The concept of maintainable performance became a quiet mantra, reflecting how the machine that once symbolized defiance had transformed into instruction beautifully. Even Japan's self-defense air force adopted Western doctrines of cohesion and sustainability, direct descendants of the strategic endurance Britain had perfected systematically. Aerial tactics manuals referenced European resilience philosophy more than pre-war individualism, showing how cultural pride had yielded to practical evolution inevitably. The Hurricane's shadow lingered, not in fear, but in influence, shaping everything from manufacturing standards to pilot training ethos permanently. For historians, this transformation symbolized reconciliation between two philosophies, precision and persistence, merged through the shared suffering of total warfare universally. In archival documents, Japanese test pilots described their first post-war encounters with surviving hurricanes as meetings with a teacher never forgotten. They admired how its modest frame contained intelligence born of necessity, transforming simplicity into strategic superiority through human-centered design mastery. That realization transcended national boundaries, proving that technology's greatest triumph lies not in destruction, but in endurance, cultivated through understanding. Aviation museums across Japan later restored captured hurricanes to display them not as trophies, but as milestones of evolution and humility. Visitors stood before those relics recognizing the irony. What once served as an adversary's shield had become a blueprint for peace eventually. The Hurricane's doctrine of survivability had outlived empires, its riveted panels carrying wisdom written in oil, smoke, and determination forever. Through it, Japan discovered that power without endurance is fleeting, yet endurance without arrogance is invincible against time's relentless judgment, absolutely. Thus, the Hurricane's legacy endures not as a weapon, but as a teacher, reminding humanity that perseverance defines greatness unassailably. Where once skies thundered with defiance, now echoes whisper lessons of balance between innovation and endurance, between pride and resilience eternally. History may have recorded the Hurricane as Britain's shield, but Japan's engineers remembered it as the mentor that redefined strength profoundly.